introduce our speaker.
Thank you, President Ron. We'll do something a little different today before we introduce our speaker, and we're so excited to have Dr. Wright with us. I noticed that a lot of people have texted in, and we have Memphis, Oxford, Columbus, Starkville, and Tupelo. And I wanted to open it up and see if there were other members from other clubs. It would be nice just to kind of quantify who all is attending, since this is a district call. So who else do we have joining before I introduce today's speaker? Germantown, I see you just texted in. You can unmute or text in either way, whatever's easier.
Pontotoc, Buddy Montgomery.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Very good. Thank y'all.
Glad you're here.
Ripley.
Excellent. Glad you're here.
Grenada.
Welcome, Grenada. Glad you're with us.
Memphis East.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Thomas.
Memphis East.
Memphis East. Great. I see we have Boonville. They have checked in. Thank you, John. Anybody else? Just want to make sure we thank y'all for joining us and recognize everybody.
Ripley, Mississippi.
Okay. Thank you, David. Anybody else? You can text in or jump in, but we really appreciate the district doing this. We will come back. Right now, we have a couple in July. They're lined up. We have the Executive Vice President for TVA on July 13th, and a mystery guest on the 20th of July will announce. So hope everybody will join us if we continue this, and we'll have it there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Carey Wright. She's the State Superintendent of Education in Mississippi. She's been in that position since 2013. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to hear her speak, it is she does a fantastic job, and we're thrilled to have her. They've done a fantastic job as advocates for early childhood learning, education, improving scores. You can go to the Mississippi Department of Education and see her complete bio, but I don't want to take any more time away from her and would love to turn it over to Jenny. And Dr. Wright, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you being a part of this for the Rotary Clubs.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me. All right, we're going to cover several things today, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to get to speak with you. I've got lots to cover, and then hopefully have an opportunity for you to ask questions. We're going to be talking not only about the educational achievements that are occurring and have occurred in Mississippi, but I want to kind of introduce you to some of the school reopening plans that may be taking place in your various areas. The digital learning plan that we have put together for our legislature's consideration, and then also what funding we feel is available to support that plan. So if we could start with the first slide. The one thing that we do start every presentation with is an introduction to, let me move this right here. An introduction to what we keep the vision and mission out in front of us is what I'm trying to say. And the one thing that we've come to realize, if we are going to create this world-class educational system, that needs to apply to all children across the state. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about our digital learning plan, because if there's one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has really lifted up in a very ugly way, is that there is a great deal of inequity going on across the state. Some children are able to connect to a very high quality plan virtually, and others are not. And that's our job to make sure that we achieve this for all children. Next slide. Our strategic plan is built around these 6 goals, and everything that we do is focused on one, if not all, of these 6 goals. So making sure that all kids are proficient and they're showing growth, making sure that all kids are graduating high school, college, and career ready. Expanding access to early childhood programs and those programs of high quality, making sure that all schools have effective teachers and leaders, making sure that everybody is using data in a way that is going to improve instruction and improve outcomes for children. And also we're striving to make sure that all of our school districts are rated as C or higher. Next slide. So let's talk first about achievements. There's lots to be proud of. This is one, we start with the early child, and I'm going to move you before I really go into this slide, we've got a brand new stat that just came out from Kids Count that I'm very proud of. We just put out a press release on that earlier today. Kids Count looks at 4 different areas of each state around the nation, and one of the buckets that they look at is education. And we have moved from being 48th in the country to 39th in the country for education. That is a huge growth for us, and a hats off to every teacher, principal, and superintendent in this state that's making this happen. But it starts with our little ones, and as you know, in 2013, the legislature passed the Early Learning Collaborative Act, and that allowed us, the first time ever in Mississippi, to put public dollars into pre-K classrooms, which is significant because there's so much research out there now, longitudinal research that shows that children that attend pre-K have better outcomes in through life, in through school, and then into their lives as adults. So we've started tracking the results of these children on our kindergarten readiness tests. So we have the ability, we changed that a few years ago. I asked each of the districts now to require parents to let us know where their children were as 4-year-olds, so that when they come in and we test them in kindergarten, that gives us an idea of which programs that they've been in that are highly successful, and which programs that they've been in that may need some help. Because we've also hired early childhood coaches then to go out and work with these programs. So you can see from this slide that 77% of our kindergarten, the children that were in our early learning collaboratives met that kindergarten readiness score in 2019. That is up significantly from 2015 when it was only 59%. And also it's showing a greater set of readiness coming into school. 77% of our collaboratives are showing a greater set of readiness. Right now, we have only 1 out of every 3 children that are coming in ready for kindergarten that have not attended our collaboratives. So you can see what a difference that makes for our children. We know what high quality is. We know how to produce that. Children are learning and thriving and moving into kindergarten with those skills. Next slide. So as you can see, when they come in to kindergarten, don't you love that picture? I love that little one. When they come into kindergarten, you can see only about 1/3 of them scoring ready. But look what happens by the time they finish kindergarten. So hats off to all those kindergarten teachers out there, because they are bringing children in that aren't really ready and making sure that more than 2/3 of them are. Now imagine if we could have all 4-year-olds in a high quality pre-K class. Imagine what that would look like for our kindergarten teachers to be able to take them and move them even further. Next slide. The Literacy-Based Promotion Act, as you know, was also passed in 2013, and that required that all children pass an assessment at the end of 3rd grade in order to be promoted to 4th grade. Originally, those children only had to score at a level 2 or higher in order to pass, and that was a very low bar. And I went back across to the legislature in 2016 and said, if you want to raise the level of literacy in this state, you need to raise the bar for requiring proficiency, and they did. And we gave all the districts 3 years notice that starting in 2019, the children were going to have to pass at level 3 or higher, much closer to proficient. We have a 5-level system, 1 to 5, 5 is advanced, 4 is proficient. So we now had this test that they had to score at a 3 or higher. And I can tell you that everybody was really concerned about how many children were going to fail. And what happened was, that is not what happened. 85.6 of those children scored at a level 3. Highest level they'd ever had to take, highest level of rigor they'd ever had to take, and look where they are now. This was amazing, and it shows us teachers are doing exactly what we want them to be doing. They're teaching exactly what we want them to be teaching, and children are learning. Next slide. So this is our assessment program. As you know, the federal law requires us to assess all grades 3 through 8, and again in high school in ELA and math, and then in grades 5, 8, and in high school in science. These are our scores. These are a combination of levels 4 and 5. This is proficient or advanced. And you can see from the time that we started with this assessment in 2016, we have made significant growth toward proficiency and advanced in our state in both ELA and in mathematics. Next slide. We also take a look at the number of districts that have more than 45% of their children scoring at a proficient or advanced. Notice the scores, how many districts we had in 16. In ELA, we only had 14. In math, we only had 15. And now we have 48 districts in ELA and 62 districts in math that are scoring, have children, more than 45% of their kids scoring proficient or advanced. So one number is more than tripled and another one is more than quadrupled. Once again, all directions heading in the right way. Next slide. Here is a table that gives you an idea from the 17-18 scores. You'll see by grade and by subject on ELA on your left, and on your right for mathematics. And then right next to that are their scores in 2018, 2019, with the delta at the very last part. You can see, with the exception of grade 6 ELA and a little dip in English too, that's not something I'm really concerned about. Everything else is showing it's heading in the right direction. Everything is in the positive. And the interesting part of these 6th graders that you see there from 2019, this was the same group that wasn't performing as grade 5, as grade 4, as grade 3. And we are still trying to figure out what's the issue with that bunch of kids, because all other children, with the exception of that group, are showing tremendous gains. So hats off to all of our teachers who are out there working so hard. Next slide. We also, this is something you can really be very proud of. I don't know how many of you are familiar with our National Assessment of Education Progress. It's referred to as NAEP. It's referred to as the nation's report card. This is the only test that is administered to all 50 states. Not to all children, though, let me say that. So they will come in grades 4 and 8, in reading and in math. I get a letter from the National Assessment Governing Board that says, okay, we're coming to Mississippi. Here are the schools we're coming to, not all. Here are the grades in the schools in grades 4 and 8 that we're coming to. Here are the students that we're going to assess, not all. The reason that this is important is because this is the way I have no control over where they come in. They literally, the National Assessment Governing Board assigns people to come into each state in the United States. They administer the assessment, then they take the assessment back, they grade the assessment, and then they produce the results. So Mississippi, nor does any other state, ever touch any of these tests. This shows you the significant growth that we have made in both ELA and math over a 10-year period of time. These are statistically significant growth markers. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that I'm happy that we only have 39% at NAEP that are proficient in math, or 24% that are 32 that are proficient in reading? No, I'm not. But let me tell you what this does mean for us as a state. Next slide. These results placed us, as our 4th graders, we were #1 in the nation for gains in both 4th grade reading and gains in 4th grade math. We were #3 in the nation for our gains in 8th grade math, and we were #4 in the nation for our gains in 8th grade reading. These are significant markers for us. This means that not only are we showing our statewide assessments we're doing it, we're proving to the nation that we're doing it. When these scores came out, Mississippi was the only state in the nation, that showed gains in 3 out of the 4 areas that were tested. All other states either went down or remained flat. So this shows the world, this shows the nation that Mississippi children are making the growth that we need them to be making, and it can be as competitive as we need them to be nationally and internationally. Next slide. Advanced placement, something that we didn't have a whole lot of, as you can see, in 2013. And coming from the Northeast, I can tell you that there's a lot of emphasis around the nation placed on children that take and pass advanced placement exams. So we started an AP initiative, actually. And since that initiative, we have nearly doubled the number of children not only participating, but showing good performance since 2013. And our AP exam rate passed an all-time high of 34%. And the very special thing about this is that we really focused on children of color as well. And you can see that the African Americans increased their qualifying scores by 9.5% and Hispanics by 6.4%. Now, what you need to look at on this graph is something very significant. Typically, when you double the number of children participating, you will see a drop in the number of qualifying scores. That has not happened. So what does that tell you? We had a lot of children out there that were perfectly capable of taking advanced placement, but were not being given the opportunity. So we worked with the IHLs in our state, and now any child that takes and passes an AP exam with a 3 or higher, which is the pass rate, automatically earns 3 college credits and can earn up to 6 college credits depending on the exam that they take. So now children coming out of high school will already be able to enter in with these college credits, saving parents money and also being advanced when they get there. Next slide. This is our graduation rate. Once again, something we're really proud of. We calculate our graduation rate based on the federal guidelines that we're given. All states in the nation must calculate graduation rate in the same manner so that you can really look and compare graduation rates from state to state, excuse me. You will, inside this, you don't see it here, but every single subgroup that we're looking at has increased its graduation rate. And if you look at that second bullet, which we are incredibly proud of, we have gone from a 27.5% graduation rate for students with disabilities to a 42.2%. That is significant over time. Now, that's a group that we continue to struggle with. It's a group that the nation continues to struggle with, but these children deserve this kind of attention that we're getting them. We are now at an all-time high of 85%. Next slide. Likewise, decreasing the dropout rate. The dropout rate right before I got here actually was at over 16%. We have gone now, starting it in 2014, from 13.9 to an all-time low of 9.7%. So are we happy that it's there? We're happy that it's dropping, but that doesn't mean that we have to let up. What these two figures combined show you, we are keeping more children in school, graduation rate going up, and we are showing a smaller dropout rate. So teachers are engaging, we are changing programs, we've added a lot of CTE programs to keep kids engaged in school and continue to learn. Next slide. We also track the number of districts and we take a look at their grades. You remember goal 6 was that all districts will be rated as C or higher. Right now, we have 70% of our districts that are rated as C or higher compared to only 62% just 3 years ago. And next slide. We do the same thing for schools. Right now, we have 74% of our schools that are rated C or higher compared to 62% just 3 years ago. Next slide. Quality counts. This is a report that comes out annually. It is done across the nation. Every state gets its own report. We were ranked in 2020 as number 2 in the nation for our improvements in education. We were also rated as one of the 5 most improved states in the nation. And this shows you also in that bullet that I shared with you earlier in our 2020, we are now ranking with the greatest improvement, ranking 39th in the country, a substantial upturn from our previous ranking of 44%. Significant growth for us. Next slide. So I want to talk to you a little bit about unless you had any questions on that, I'll just keep going. Okay, school reopening plan. So what are schools going to do? Well, next slide. We partnered with 9 superintendents from a very diverse range of school districts. And we said, what do you think school districts need to be considering right now when it comes to reopening? And so this group of superintendents worked together. They divided it into the 6 buckets that you see at the bottom: academic programming, operations, family and community support, communications, health and safety, and technology and learning management systems. And they said, you know, we need to be thinking about this. Children have been out of school. There are going to be a lot of kids that are needing extra help. And so that all goes into the academic programming. What do our schedules need to look like? How do we need to ensure that all children are getting access to high quality instruction? That second bullet around operations is just what you would think. What about our budget? What about our food services? What about transportation? What about the cleanliness of buildings? Family and community support. How are we going to reach out and help our families engage back in the process of learning? And how can we provide them the help that they need as they're helping children at home? Communications, you really can't over communicate enough. Parents need to know what's going on. Teachers need to know what's going on. Children need to know what's going on. And I can tell you from conversations that I've had with my Teachers Advisory Council, which is well over 200 teachers, my Students Advisory Council, which is hovering just under 100, and my Superintendent's Advisory Council, one of the things that they're really focusing on is better ways to communicate so that everybody knows what's happening. And then health and safety. We need to be practicing social distancing. I am on a conference call every single week with Dr. Dobbs, our state health officer, and he is also having calls with all superintendents around the state. As a matter of fact, he has one tomorrow, and I'll talk to him just about that in a second. But social distancing, the wearing of masks, the cleanliness of our buildings, who comes in, the temperature taking, all of those considerations are in that bucket. And then last but not least, what are we doing across our state to ensure that all children have the technology that they need and have access to the high quality content that they need in order to learn at home. Next slide. So they came up with a suggestion of 3 different kinds of schedules, or a combination thereof: a traditional schedule, a hybrid schedule, or a virtual schedule. So let's start with the first one. So the traditional schedule, that means everybody's back in the building, present all at one time, also trying to do their best to follow the modifications that we have put out to them from the CDC and also from the Mississippi State Health Department. Dr. Dobbs has been issuing a lot of guidance along with this. So what does that entail? Well, there needs to be daily screening going on, temperatures being taken as people walk in the building, ensuring that who's coming in the building is safe. How do we adjust transportation? CDC put out some guidelines for that. How do we routinely disinfect everything in the building, whether it's in our halls or in our classrooms or in the cafeteria and the stairwells? And they made some suggestions about how about if we keep kids in one spot and rotate the teachers around? That would reduce the number of interactions that children would have in larger bunches of children in hallways, etc. And then how are we going to plan to serve children or staff who simply cannot return to the building because they have health issues that prevent them from doing so? And we need to limit student movement, and we also need to restrict the amount of people that are together at one time. I think Dr. Dobbs has said his recommendation has been that it should be no more than 20 that are gathered inside at any one location. Next slide. So there's a hybrid. So you can have some face-to-face instruction and some online instruction. The one thing I think that we've realized through all of this is that our little ones in particular are the ones that are really struggling to be doing things virtually. So a lot of our superintendents are thinking about bringing in the younger ones first, maybe for face-to-face, keeping the older ones possibly on a hybrid schedule of sometimes in and sometimes out, but keeping them more out at least till they get the little ones in and get them settled. All these decisions are being made by local superintendents along with their teams. And we have allowed them to make the decisions that they feel are best for their communities. And the last one, we have some superintendents that have said, I'm going to stick to it right now. I don't feel comfortable bringing children back in. As you know, Mississippi is one of those states that's in the news daily about the number of cases that are continuing to rise around our state. Dr. Dobbs, I think, was most recently in a conversation with him, most concerned most recently about Oxford because of the issues that were surrounding the spiking in Oxford due to the fraternities and rush season. So here you've got districts that are saying, right now, I need to figure out a way to keep families safe and staff safe and children safe. I've got a learning management system. I can load content onto that. My students have the laptops and devices that they need. So what we're going to do is continue to provide training for teachers virtually. But the one thing I can tell you that the department is also hearing loud and clear, we need to be providing training for parents. Because a lot of parents were caught flat-footed too, and did not know how to do some of these things, didn't know how to log into a Zoom call, or didn't know how to, access some of the things that needed to be accessed. So it's not just teachers that need the professional development, it's also our parents as well. Next slide. So when all this hit, and in conversation with all of the superintendents, I felt very strongly that we needed to jump on this. As I said to people, if there's a silver lining in this COVID issue, it's that we have the ability now as a state to take on a statewide plan for technology. And our children deserve this. It is not going to be a matter of if we are back in this homebound state, if you will. I think it's just a matter of when and to the extent. And is it statewide or is it regionally? So we developed as a department a statewide plan. I'm going to walk you through this now, and I'm going to then talk to you about how we think the funding might work. Next slide. We've asked the legislature for $250 million to support this plan for all districts, all schools, and all students. If this is funded, this will essentially create a one-to-one initiative for every single district. We will start negotiating prices and establish state contracts, not only for the devices and software, but the content, the PD, the support that's needed, because the state has funds that are coming into it. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in just a second. But this is our moment. When I testified before the Senate, I said, this is a moral imperative. We can no longer just be satisfied sitting back realizing so many of our children, particularly those in poverty, particularly those children of color, are going without the connection they need in order to make sure learning is taking place at their home. Next slide. So our plan has 6 components. Obviously, the one that you think about the most logically comes to your mind are the devices and the services that children need. But it's also connectivity. Hotspots are going to work in some places, not all. Data plans are going to work in some places, not all. Broadband is obviously an issue that we need to be thinking about as we work through this. But learning management systems are those platforms that all districts should have that they can then load high quality instructional materials onto. So the devices that we are recommending to be purchased are cellular enabled devices, so that just like where you get your connectivity for your cell phone, then that could be where you would get your connectivity for your device. But then districts would have a way of loading all digital content that children need, the curriculum that they need, onto their devices, so that when they go home with that device and they can connect cellularly, they can still be connected to learning with a device at home that is connected some way to a cellular device. I talked about PD for teachers and parents and school staff. This is one thing I can tell you, that when I had these conversations with my teachers advisory, they were saying, boy, I wish I had known how to, and it was all these simple things that they had to teach themselves. And they also said, if I ever get my kids back in front of me, these are going to be how we're going to spend the first 2 weeks of school, learning how to log into all these things, electronically, learning how to schedule Zoom call or Teams calls, etc. Then we also have to think about security and support. We want these devices to be safe. We want these devices to only be able to connect to where we want children connecting them to. And so we have the ability to do that by preloading software and things of that nature, and management devices onto those as well. And last but not least is telehealth and teletherapy. We have heard loud and clear from teachers and from parents and from children, there's a lot of social emotional stress going on right now, and families are under a lot of stress. There's also just the stress of being fearful about your safety. And am I going to be safe when I come back? And we know in the state of Mississippi, we do not have enough physicians for this state. We certainly don't have enough pediatricians for this state. And we certainly don't have enough mental health therapists and counselors for our state. So how then can we connect them in such a way that they have a way to have a person in front of them on their device or in a telehealth situation or a teletherapy situation connected to a health professional or a mental health therapist? So those are the components, if you will, of our plan. Next slide. So here's the funding I want to talk about. Next slide. We had money coming into the state. We had $1.25 billion that came in as a stimulus package because of coronavirus aid and relief. That's a separate set of money. K-12 has about $169.8 million coming in. We call those the ESSER funds. These dollars are coming into the state, but they're going directly to our districts. And they're going directly to the districts based on the same formula that was used to give them Title I money. So when it comes into the state, the department will reserve 10%, 0.5 of that to administer these funds, and then the other 9.5 to assist in getting the plan funded and to assist those districts that are struggling the most. Governor Reeves received about $34.6 million of CARES money. That acronym is GEER, if you've ever heard that, G-E-E-R. So he has 34.6 as well. So we went to the legislature with our plan and said, here's what we're requesting, and here's how we think that it could be funded. And we've also had philanthropy step up. I've got to say, it used to be the Mississippi Association of Grant Makers. It's now the Mississippi Association of Philanthropists and Nonprofits. And they reached out to us and said, how can we help? We would love to be a part of this. They've written a letter. Every member of that organization signed off on it. That went to the elected leadership as well. Next slide. So we have urged the legislature as well, because, you know, MAEP dollars are out there. MAEP, we're obviously, you know, that the economy has been hit. What we're urging the legislature to do is, even if you are not going to fully fund MAEP, if you would at least level fund it for this coming year, and where you can get money is obviously our rainy day fund. It's still fully funded. And so rather than hitting education again, to at least level fund it and take money from the rainy day fund. If we cannot allow all these gains that we've made to just go for naught. And we've got to work as a unit. I've now had the Mississippi Association, the Medical Association, contact me wanting to support it. They have sent in letters. I've had the Pediatric Association for Mississippi contact me, supporting us, wanting to send in letters. But it's really going to be critical that we stick together in this. We will never, ever have a moment in time that we can step forward as a state with this amount of money that's coming in and do something for education that would ensure all children of the state, the future of our state, be connected to learning. Next slide. So that ends my presentation. I'm certainly open to any and all of your questions. I thank you for your time. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I work on every single day and continue to work on every single day. It's something that I'm excited about. It's something that we put a lot of time and energy into. So I'll stop from there and answer your questions.
Dr. Wright, this is Randy McCoy in Tupelo. I am concerned about what you mentioned about Dr. Dobbs saying no more than 20 students to gather at a time. How is the state recommending to handle class sizes when class sizes are typically more than 20? Are you going to be able to combine virtual and traditional schedules so that some students may be at home and others are in class? How are you going to manage that 20 student gathering?
Well, and I think that's up to the local superintendent. That's not something that the state is dictating. That's the reason we've given them an option of any of those schedules. The other thing that the state board did that I failed to tell you, the state board gave the districts a lot of waivers on things. So they waived class size for this upcoming year. They waived seat time for this upcoming year. So it used to be you had to have 140 hours for one Carnegie unit. And so we waived that, but we've asked districts then to let us know what their plan is in place to ensure that that Carnegie unit is going to be earned. We've waived the length of a school day. It used to be 330 minutes of instruction. So the board said it's got to be a minimum of 4 hours. I've heard some superintendents say, well, I'm going to bring in some students on some days and others on other days and spread them out. So we've tried to give them the flexibility from our waivers to address the issue that you're talking about right now. And I think that's where all the superintendents and their teams are certainly working on that as we speak.
As a follow-up to that, on the waivers, do these waivers, I know that many of the things that the state has to do has to go to Washington to be approved. Are these waivers having to go to Washington to get their approval? Are we going to be in violation of those standards as well? Are all these standards just local standards that the state has put on top of the federal?
That's exactly right. Every state puts out policy around the length of the school day or how many days school has to be in existence. So that's one thing we didn't waive. This upcoming year, we did not waive the 180-day rule. So all children are going to have to be, learning for 180 days. Where you come into your federal waivers are things that the federal government requires, like state testing. I've already been asked, can we just not do state testing? I don't have the authority to do that. That has to come from Washington, D.C. and the Secretary of Education. So right now, the Secretary of Education and her staff have already come out and said that they have no intention of offering waivers this year for state testing at this point in time. Now, could she change her mind down the road? She could, but right now we have to assume that at the end of the 2021 school year, we will be administering statewide assessments.
Hey, Dr. Wright, this is David Sparks. We've heard some of the local junior colleges, which I know are not part of what we're talking about, but they have backed some of their start dates up so they can finish early. Do you expect some of the schools, high schools, elementary schools, to do that, to start a little earlier so they don't have to go or possibly come back after Thanksgiving and they're finished by the end of November?
Yes, I do think that there are some that are looking at that, quite honestly. I think that we've left that once again up to each local school superintendent and their local boards, but I have heard that there are people that are thinking about starting earlier than typical. We also get asked a lot of questions around, teachers are saying, well, what standard should we start teaching with? Should we go back and pick up the standards from last year and start with that? And I just want you to know that my advice to them has been no. Start with the grade level standards that children are right now. Our standards are designed in such a way, kind of an elegant way, that they build upon each other, that if you are teaching the grade level standards, it's going to become obvious to you which ones children may or may not have missed. And so then you could embed that in your teaching. But if we start by teaching one full quarter's worth of standards starting in the fall of the year, you're already behind and children are already behind and there's no way to catch up. But if you start with grade level standards and then embed the ones that they've missed along the way, then we stand a better shot of getting children their learning caught where it needs to be.
We have a question that was typed in to address work between states on these efforts, and can standards help raise all the students' activities across states, not just Mississippi, but Mississippi, Alabama, for instance, together?
Absolutely. I'm on calls each week, a minimum of 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, quite honestly, calls with other state chiefs. And we share a lot of information back and forth, and we're all struggling with some of the same things, like the rural areas of our states lacking connectivity. So each of us is sharing what we're doing with each other, so that we can, we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel, right? So if I've got something that I can share with another state and vice versa, and that is something that we do on an ongoing basis.
Great.
this is Randy McCoy for one other question. You said that you're not going to waive the 180 days of instruction. So you said also that we would probably have shutdowns in some schools or schools districts because of reoccurrence of the virus. So how are you going to count student days then?
Well,
have you developed a mechanism so that you can count those?
Well, actually, you bring up a really good question, because that's something that every state chief is struggling with, and that's counting attendance. So I just was on a call last week with the CEO of Attendance Works, Hetty Chang. She is the national organization for attendance and chronic absenteeism, et cetera. So she is putting forth some ideas about how states can do that. And I told the superintendents the last time I was on the phone with them that we're going to be giving them some suggestions on how to do that. That's going to make it easier because they're concerned about their ADA. They're concerned because that's tied in with MAEP, and rightfully so. I get that. We've been trying to get the legislature to go to ADM, which is daily membership, which would be so much more practical, yes, than ADA. And so I know this has been a tough session for them, but I'm not backing up on that one. If we don't get it done this session, I'm coming back again, because this ADA is a dipstick in time. It's who happens to be there on any given day versus your membership that you're responsible for all year long. So we're working to try to come up with some solutions that are going to be practical for them to follow too. I wish I could tell you that we've got all this worked out, but sometimes it takes a little longer than others. And but know that it's something that we are on 24/7. I mean, I can tell you that we're constantly on calls with people to try and resolve some of these issues nationally. But my heart is what's happening here in Mississippi, and so that's the reason I think if we can get this plan passed, and I think there's the money to do it. Then I think it's just going to benefit the state, because you've still got community colleges where connectivity is an issue. You've still got universities where people are going to, that connectivity is still an issue. This is a workforce development issue. This isn't just an education issue. This is something from little ones through adults that could benefit. If we can manage this across the state, there's not a district in this state or a workforce development in this state that will not benefit from this plan.
What about masking or no masking for the students?
Well, I think the CDC has put out guidelines on that. I think it's going to be really hard, I think, for the little ones, to be honest, to wear a mask every day. It's hard enough for adults to wear a mask, when they're going out. So I think that they're going to try to, different ways. I think some are going to go more along the hand washing, sanitizing, social distancing way, and then I think others are going to at least try to attempt the mask wearing. I think that we're certainly hoping to encourage that in both all of our middle and high schools. I think at elementary it's going to depend on the kind of students that you have. I get asked a lot also about athletics, and so let me be very upfront about athletics. Dr. Dobbs is more than concerned about athletics. I can tell you that. And I can also tell you that we've already had athletes identified with COVID in the state, football players and baseball players. And so what that's meant is a quarantining of the team and all that entails. And so that is something that Dr. Dobbs, I know, is going to be speaking to all the superintendents about tomorrow, as well as extracurriculars. He's concerned about things like choir. When you're shouting and when you're singing, or when you're in a basketball, auditorium and you're screaming and, molecules are flying. So I think it's a real issue, and it's not one that's going to be easy. You see it with the NFL, you see it with the NBA, you see it with the baseball teams how many of these people are coming down with COVID. And so it's just going to have to be something that that we're on, and that we give superintendents the directions. Okay, you've got a football player that's come down with COVID, or a coach that's come down with COVID. Now, what does this mean for your school? What does this mean for your community? I can tell you that my colleague in Texas, they have prescripted it right down to the number of days. If it is a staff member with COVID or a student member with COVID, all schools are shut down in that area for X number of days. They've got it boom, boom, boom. And so I think that, and Texas is a state that's seeing growth in cases as well. So we're just taking in all the advice that we can and passing that on, and also realizing that you've got to be practical, but you've also got to worry about everybody's safety. Because I'm hearing it from all ends. I'm hearing it from the parents on my email that say, bring them all back. Like, forget it, just bring them all back. And then I'm hearing from that other end that says, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want you bringing my kid back unless you can be guaranteeing that my kid is safe. So superintendents are caught smack dab in the middle, and my heart goes out to them for having to make these decisions.
You mentioned about social distancing on buses. There are going to be huge hidden costs.
Yes.
For instance, transportation. If you, instead of running one route in the morning and one in the afternoon, if you have to try to socially distance on the bus, you could have the same bus running 3 and 4 times, tripling your cost for not only operation, but for employees. Same thing for cafeteria and food service. And the number of staff you're going to need for cleaning the building. So is the legislature going to provide some additional funds for these hidden costs that no one's going to see, so to speak?
Well, that's a good question. And realize they're going to be getting CARES dollars. So you've got all districts will be getting CARES money. And so some districts, it may be, I don't know, like $400,000 or $500,000. Others, it's going to be in the millions, because it's based on Title I. One of our districts is going to be getting $12 million because they have that many children that qualify for Title I services. So they can use those monies, and that was really the intent of Congress when that was passed, was to mitigate the impact of COVID. So those dollars can be used for cleaning, they can be used for gas for buses, they can be used for PPE if that's needed. So they are all going to be, they can use, and for infrastructure. We asked them how they were going to be spending their dollars actually when we did a needs assessment, and the vast majority went straight to, we got to do something about infrastructure, meaning devices, learning management systems, connectivity for children. So the dollars that they have are very, there's a lot of flexibility. There's also a difference in the timeline. That $1.25 billion that I mentioned to you earlier that came into the state, those monies have to be expended by December 31st of this year. The monies that go to the districts and the money that went to the governor, they have until September the 30th, 2022 to spend. Also, the federal government gave waivers to their title dollars. So in the past, there was a cap on how much money districts could spend for infrastructure, but the federal government lifted that they gave them a waiver on that. So they have their current title dollars. They're going to be getting their CARES money in. And then as of July 1, they're going to be getting brand new title dollars for the upcoming year. So they have a variety of monies that they can use to help pay for some of these things.
We have another question in the chat. It says, is there any guidance for districts where most parents want the schools to have a traditional schedule? This would not allow the recommended social distancing on buses or classrooms.
That's going to be up to the local superintendent to make those decisions. I mean, that's the reason that we gave it back to the locals, because what's good for DeSoto may not be the same thing that's good for Amit, that may not be the same thing that's good for Meridian. So we have to allow those superintendents to make the decisions that their communities feel are in their best interest. And then how do you figure out that, knowing how you place people around the building? I've been in several calls with superintendents on that very issue.
Hey, Dr. Wright, it's David again. I live in Oxford, Tupelo Club, of course, but we've had a student athlete test positive, and it wasn't in football and it wasn't in a traditional sport. Not going to get into the details, but it is a concern with athletics and Oxford and Ole Miss and students. Are there schools? We've heard that there are certain districts in the state that are not having summer practices because of the outbreaks of some of the hot spots. That wouldn't surprise me.
I think that there are some coaches that just said this isn't worth it until we can get this under control. And I think depending on where you are, if you are spiking in one of those areas, it would make sense to me that a coach would just say, let's just wait, and then start up practice when we feel like it's safe. And that they can certainly do. Absolutely.
Any more questions for Dr. Wright? Dr. Wright, we appreciate your being with us today. Thank you, and it's been very helpful to me, and I know those others who participated.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'd like to thank all the folks who joined us from other clubs. I wrote down Boonville, Memphis, Oxford, Germantown, Pontotoc, Ripley, Grenada, Memphis East. If there are others, I'm sorry for not calling you out, but calling your name, but recognizing you. But thank you for joining us. Next meeting is next the 29th, and I think we have David Albert Shan with Cooper Tire. Is that still on, or is that?
Yes, we're going to have Cooper Tire. If there are other districts, clubs that would like to listen into Cooper Tire, that's fine. It's going to be more of a traditional Tupelo-based meeting, but if there is interest, just let me or Ron or Jenny know, and we'll send out an invitation to other clubs if they would like to join. We will send invitations out for our TVA vice president and our mystery guest in mid-July. Those would appeal more district, but Cooper Tire will be our next program.
Thank you. If there, as I say, I'll be checking with Danny shortly as to the weather forecast, and we'll be sending out an email shortly as to whether we're going to have our hamburger social tonight or whether we'll try and postpone it to next Monday. If there are no other announcements, we will be dismissed with the Rotary motto. Service above self, one profits most who serves best. Thank you.